I'm very glad to have been invited here today. I have been asked to talk about how we are addressing education on Holocaust in Sweden, and also to say some brief words on Raoul Wallenberg. But I'm going to start with 1997, because then a survey was conducted in Sweden indicating that Swedish teenagers lacked knowledge on the events leading to the Second World War, and a lot of them were not even aware of the Holocaust. Our Prime Minister at the time, Göran Persson, found it unacceptable that there was very little educational material about the war and the complexity that led to it. And it should be noted that Prime Minister Persson had already initiated the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance at the time. I was State Secretary at the Ministry of Justice then, and we convened an international meeting in Stockholm at which the Holocaust was addressed from very many different perspectives. And the initiative resulting, among other things, in the declaration of the Stockholm International Forum on the Holocaust, stressing the need for a continuous promotion for education, remembrance, and research about the Holocaust. And Sweden's response to the alleged ignorance among Swedish students was Living History, an information campaign where every family in Sweden with a child received a book under the title Tell Ye Your Children, containing accurate information on the Holocaust, the events that led to it, and general information on racism and our obligation to counteract it. Well, later on, it turned out that the survey wasn't entirely accurate. People knew more about the Holocaust than we had assumed. But nevertheless, the campaign was essential. There was a lack of both knowledge and awareness among students. Teachers and parents lacked the tools needed to address the topic, and even more important, the younger generation rarely discussed this topic as relevant to them. I have to say some words on Sweden. We have a little bit more than 9 million inhabitants. We haven't been to war for more than 300 years. And we used to be a very homogeneous society. We had a lot of emigrants to America, for example, but not many immigrants. But Sweden has undergone a dramatic change during the last decades. Today, more than 20% of the Swedish inhabitants, they are either born outside of Sweden or have a parent that was born outside of Sweden. We have immigrants from all over the world. The majority, around 60%, are from Europe, but the rest is from countries from all over the world. Many of them political refugees that have come from war zones and oppressions. So in a sense, Sweden has become a multicultural society, or maybe more accurate, some parts of Sweden can be characterized as multicultural society. So I am mentioning this because the notion of Sweden being a very homogeneous society made us less aware of the occurring signs of racism and xenophobia and the complexity leading to it. We were not really aware of what was hiding beneath the surface, and maybe we were a little bit naive. When other European countries had xenophobic parties elected to their parliaments, we were convinced that this would never happen in Sweden. Unfortunately, I have to admit that Sweden, since the last election, has a xenophobic party present in the parliament, although it's small and it has little influence. But still. And the initiative from the Prime Minister was very important, and the campaign served as a wake-up call. It raised awareness when awareness should be raised. It didn't prevent us from having a xenophobic party in the parliament, but it provided us with the tools to counteract xenophobia, and obviously this is even more important today. And that's why the campaign continued, and the Living History Forum became a permanent governmental agency with the task to work with the issues related to tolerance, democracy, and human rights, using the Holocaust and other crimes against humanity as the starting point. And their mission derives from the idea that the past and the present are continuously present in everything we do. With this perspective, their goal is to teach about historic patterns, They say, our wish is to equip people with knowledge for the future, and our goal is to work for everyone's equal value. The forum has continuous contacts with teachers and other experts within the educational system, and they develop methods and tools for reaching their key target group, young people. And just recently, they updated Tell Your Children, and there is a version in English that you can download from the internet. And I also happen to know that the forum sometimes is collaborating with the American organizations Facing History and ourselves. But the forum is not the only stakeholder. A very important player is the Swedish Committee on Anti-Semitism. This is an NGO with no affiliations to any political party or religious organization, and its purpose is to counteract and inform about anti-Semitism. And the committee continuously covers the public debate and mass media, and they criticize and answers anti-Semite and racist expressions. And in addition, also the committee counteracts anti-Semitism through education, and they deliver information and material to teachers, students, media, political organizations, and others, and they supply speakers and give advice on study trips to the places of the Holocaust. Well, this committee was founded in 1983, and the initiative grew from a result of the wave of anti-Semitism that was expressed at the time of the Lebanon War in 1982. The war triggered anti-Jewish reactions both in Europe and in Sweden. So the Swedish Committee Against Anti-Semitism is very often working together with the Living History Forum in producing teachers' material. And governmental agencies such as Swedish National Board for Youth Affairs would also work together with the committee, and together with the Ministry for Foreign Affairs, the committee produced educational material on Raoul Wallenberg for the last year's celebration. Another example, some of you have probably heard of the Swedish crime novelist Stig Larsson. He wrote The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, amongst other things. Well, writing novels was something he did in his spare time. For more than a decade, he was the front person for an NGO called Expo, and their mission is to counteract right-wing extremism and racism, including anti-Semitism. Also, their tools are education, information, and lobbying, and they are active in tracking and finding and then criticizing racism occurring on the internet or wherever. Well, Stig Larsson, he was very active and brave, and he never swerved to racism and the fight against racism. And this really affected his private life. He was under a constant threat, and he has to be very cautious about his whereabouts, and he had a secret address and all those stuff. Another completely different initiative that actually can be seen as a result of the above-mentioned Stockholm conference is Paideia, the European Institute for Jewish Studies in Sweden. And Paideia is a non-denominational, international academic framework that was established in the year 2000 with funding from the Swedish government. The institute is dedicated to the revival of Jewish culture in Europe. And Paideia educates leaders for Europe, academics, artists, community activists, and they present itself as follows. In renewing interpretation of Jewish texts, Paideia is reviving a European Jewish voice long silenced by communism and post-Holocaust trauma, a voice that can contribute to culturally rich and pluralistic Europe. And the idea is that Jewish experience can be used in order to enhance the knowledge regarding the challenges that derives in a multicultural society. And this is actually one of the prime missions for the Swedish Jewish theater, as is expressed by the founder Robert Weil. Not only does Jewish culture enrich society, but more important, how can experiences in interacting with the majority culture gained by a minority culture be used in the struggle to manage a diverse society? Well, there are so many more initiatives, and it would take too long time if I would just enumerate them. It's like young Muslims against anti-Semitism and so on. But I promised Melissa to provide her with a list of links, and then she can distribute them to you, as most of it would be translated into English. Well, I mentioned that one of the activities was the celebration of the memory of Raoul Wallenberg. Wallenberg is one of the most famous and admired Swedes. In fact, no other Swede has so many schools, streets, and parks around the world named after them as Raoul Wallenberg. And 2012 marked the centenary of Wallenberg's birth. Yet his humanitarian achievements live on. And they show how the importance of personal courage and of taking a stand, because one individual can make a difference. And to celebrate his extraordinary life and actions, the Swedish government honored his memory both in Sweden and abroad throughout the whole of 2012. I know you're familiar with the story on Raoul Wallenberg, so I won't dwell so much on this, but Wallenberg was, as you know, imprisoned by the Soviet forces in 1945, and his fate still remained unknown. Russia claims he died in a Soviet prison in July of 1947. However, many witness reports suggest he may have been alive much later. In Sweden, we have for a long time focused on his mysterious disappearance, and that is indeed a vital part of his story. But we must never forget the meaning of his story, the meaning of his life. During a time of war, Raoul Wallenberg made an active choice not to be indifferent. So when Raoul Wallenberg in 1945 was asked by his colleague and friend Per Anger why he took all the personal risks, Raoul Wallenberg's answer was, "To me, there is no other choice. I've accepted this assignment, and I could never return to Sweden without the knowledge that I had done everything within human power to save as many Jews as possible." Well, this wasn't really true, because Raoul Wallenberg was a person who had a lot of choices. He could have stayed in neutral Sweden. He could have had quite a comfortable life, but he chose not to. And Raoul Wallenberg serves as an example for all those who challenge autocratic regimes despite the risks for their own lives. And perhaps the most important part of Wallenberg's legacy lies in its lesson for the generations to come. So it is incumbent on us to pass on his story to those who come after us, not as a part of an heroic myth, but as an example of the values that should form the way we live our lives. Raoul Wallenberg is a proud symbol for what one man can do to make a difference. Thank you.